So welcome to Chicago Open Mic. I'm your host, Ellis. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Cameron Esposito. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, you did it right. You nailed it.
You're a rare treat. You're a veteran of the game. How long have you been doing stand-up comedy?
I've been doing stand-up for about 4 years. Ooh, we're going to pick up the L, maybe. That seems like very...
I get all kinds of sights
Chicago,
and sounds from Chicago,
Yeah.
Usually a lot of sirens.
Oh, nice. Hopefully nobody coming to rescue you.
So what brought you to your first open mic?
Man, I was doing improv professionally in Boston, and I had some friends who did stand-up, and I asked them if they would put me on their show to do stand-up, and I had never done an open mic before. Okay. And, it went,
So, you're
crappy.
not from Chicago? You're originally from Boston?
I grew up here, but I was living in Boston for a bunch of years. So my point being, I didn't go to my first open mic until, well after I had done some showcases, which is not how it goes. So I didn't know anything about what you're supposed to do.
Stacy Norgren, she had a similar experience where she went from an open mic to a 300-seater to open mics everywhere.
Oh, that's really interesting.
So, talk to me about what got you into improv, and then what brought you out of improv and into stand-up.
Yeah, for sure. I graduated from college and the next day, literally the next day, went to this open call for an improv theater in Boston, and
What did you major in?
Theology and English, the funniest of all subjects. And then because I had done this college improv group, I was like, I'll try out on a lark. And then, I ended up getting work there, and I ended up getting work at another improv theater in Boston. So much so that, when I was 22, I was working on a main stage show out there at Improv Asylum. Yes, it is crazy, because here's why. I'd never taken an improv class. I'd only done terrible college improv. So I ended up getting fired because... there it is. It's going to keep being awesome. It's going to keep being awesome all the time. I ended up getting fired because I didn't know what I was doing at all. And
well, how long did you last before...
I worked at one theater doing shows once a week for about a year, and then I worked on a main stage production doing 6 shows a week for about 6 months. Was
it decent money doing that? Or?
Yeah, I actually made money. When I was 22, I was making money, and I had another job at the time. Yeah. I made way more money than I make now. And anyway, so I had already had this awesome position in the theater that was you're really funny, but you don't know what you're doing. Let us train you, and we'll put you maybe back on the main stage sometime in a couple of years. And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to train to do the job I've already shittily done.
Gotcha.
So I moved to Chicago because I thought there would be more improv
Did you pick up
opportunities
on the improv
here.
Then? Did you do IO?
I started doing Second City when I moved here. And
did you get in with them right away?
No, I did the conservatory program for a little while, and then I just it's rough being a woman in the Chicago improv scene, especially a queer woman. It's also, it can also sometimes be isolating being a female stand-up performer, but people have to give you your time on stage, you can't, you still get 3 minutes, doesn't matter if you're a chick, but if you're doing improv, I just had it with doing blowjob scenes. I was I don't want to do my time. I don't want to do this with my time anymore.
These are two issues I wanted to get into, and it's that stand-up particularly, I don't know about improv, but it's very much a boys club. It's the straight white male privilege is personified. And so what is your experience being a woman, and then what is your experience being openly gay with the scene?
I think
you're one of 2 openly gay comedians I've met in the last year.
Yeah, it is. It's. Definitely in Chicago, it's pretty unusual. When I first started, I thought that it was I had a really hard time because I was at 25 when I started, or 24.
You mean stand-up?
Yeah, when I started doing stand-up, I was 24, which isn't a lot older, but there are a lot of open mics are I think the standard issue is I'm a 22-year-old white boy, and I think that even just being a couple years older than that, and even being a woman.
I'm 28, and I'm sort of becoming a regular in the open mic scene for the first time, and everybody's 23, 24,
right.
even now.
And so they have a lot of things Hi, this is Coleman Bryce.
We have the chef's table back.
Yeah, we have the chef's table back here because we're recording a podcast.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay, but do you want to say anything?
Fuck you. No.
Yeah. That's the owner of Cole's Bar where we are. Anyway, starting out, I felt like everybody was friends, like outside of the scene, and that I just was not friends with them.
It's very cliquish.
Yes.
But I've sort of observed that, like, my freshman year in college, I went through a lot of, like, awkward socializing and drinking, and now these 23-year-olds and 22-year-olds, they're having my freshman year at the open mic scene.
I think you're totally right. I also think that's something I just didn't realize, because I was, like, not taking it personally, but I was like, man, people are not paying any attention to me. What I didn't realize is that, like, if you've been doing stand-up for a certain length of time, these people become your coworkers and they become your friends. Like, so it's a weird dynamic, you know, like you're drinking with your coworkers, you're spending all this time with like this core group of people. It wasn't that people were being cold to me, it was just that like
they had their peers.
Those are their exactly. Like that's their I think of it as running in classes, you know what I mean? Like there's like seniors who like are like, yeah, why don't we talk to the freshmen? Like you just wouldn't.
Said that on I just did an interview. Somebody interviewed me for the first time, and I said, like, your first 2 years is like getting your associates.
Yeah.
Like, you move on to campus and you start living in the city.
I think that's 100%
it's a natural
true.
Progression.
Yeah. But I think especially if you are in any sort of like minority group, I think that can feel it can feel more personal than it is. You know, like I think that now I realize like there are like all the dudes who are my like coworkers and who are my cohort, like they totally respect me. We're very good friends, but I think it feels different going in.
So, two sort of directions I want to go into questioning with sort of like being a woman on the scene. People have said like they got a showcase, and people said like, whose dick did you suck to get that showcase? Or like women aren't funny. Have you experienced stuff like that?
You know, honestly, the only thing that I recognize as being true is that like bookers and the people who run shows at like a higher level, they're predominantly male. And so if you think about there being like a specifically male sense of humor and then a specifically female sense of humor, which, hey, I mean, there are certain dudes I think are really funny and there are certain ladies I think are really funny, but I also think that there can be like a divide. And I think if everybody who's making the decisions about booking is a dude, then I think as a woman it can be harder for you.
Inherent bias.
Yeah, exactly, because they're like, well, like you're a lady, maybe people don't like that particular.
Something that's come up in another podcast is somebody said like, for women it's easier to get noticed in the beginning, but there's like a glass ceiling as to how far you can go. Whereas a guy, like it'll take more time to start featuring and showcasing, but then you'll have more options available to you in the long run. Is that something you feel like is correct?
Again, just in terms of, I do think that it's easier to get noticed. I mean, it's a numbers game, of course. Like if you are the 30th person up in an open mic and you're the first chick, like even the difference in your voice, like versus a male voice, it's like a reset button. People can pay attention again. But
instantly stand out.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that this is so awesome, by the way. This is so our lives. We're like yelling in the back of a room. But in terms of the glass ceiling, I do think, again, in terms of getting people who have power to pay attention and support you, I think that as a woman that can be challenging. I think that bookers and producers and management, like they want to find that like that golden guy who's going to go out there and get the college crowd on his sell 1 million beers.
Well, I've heard like a lot with like Zanies and Riddles. They stay with like the older sort of the 80s Seinfeld persona right now.
Yes.
Now that they're competing with like Mike Dave and the Red Bar Entourage, they're trying to freshen it up a little bit, but he's really changing the paradigm of like how comedy is discovered in Chicago. I've heard there's some contention between like the improv and the stand-up, because Second City and Zanies being the two big avenues for comedians.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that at all, or can you?
I don't think it's contention as much as like I think that those things exist. Whenever people find out that I do comedy in Chicago, they always ask me if I do improv, or like if I know their friend who does improv, because so many people do improv here, and I'm always like, no, I don't know that person at all, because I think of them as being like really separate spheres. I think it would be like the difference if somebody was like, "Hey, you're a ballroom dancer. Do you know my friend who's like a break dancer?" And you'd be like, "Well, no. I mean, like we both are. There's dancer in the title, but like we don't hang out in the same." I think in some cities there's more overlap because there's like smaller scenes. People do both. But in Chicago, I think there's like almost no overlap.
Chicago's a very segregated place. So like north and south, and even like Boys Town is sort of the gay community. Are there any like gay comedy rooms?
I wouldn't say there are gay comedy rooms. It's more like there are, like sometimes I do gay themed shows, so it'll be like at a bar or a performance space or a community center or something where there's a gay clientele. Do you want to not sit here? We could sit in the front. Audience members also. We could sit in the front where there's not this. Do you want to try that?
I'll pause it.
Pause it.
Alright. So, you've been doing this about 4 years. How much material would you say like you've written versus like how much is where you really want it to be?
Oh man, that's such a good question.
Do you have like a solid hour yet?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. So I put out my first album this past year, and that
awesome.
is
What's
thank
it called?
you.
Plug it.
It's called. I think we're okay for
good.
now.
Thank you.
If that's okay. Is that right? That was a lady at Chicken Run, the restaurant that we're at right now.
We've taken it over.
We've taken it out. We turned on the TV, and I bought a soda, and then they gave me a straw, so I put the straw in the soda, even though it's like a can. It looks really stupid. Yes, it's called Grab Them Aghast, and it's 45 or 50 minutes of stuff I don't. Yeah, it's on iTunes. It's through Rooftop Comedy Records, so you can also get it on rooftopcomedy.com or on Amazon or iTunes.
Did you do like a straight 45 minute, or did you cut up a couple like 10 to 15 minute sets?
No, I did 2 nights of. I did like 2 nights. Well, it might be. I don't even know what the total running time is. That's terrible. I did like 2 almost hour sets, back-to-back nights, and then I lost half of one of those nights. So then I used one of the nights, but in the middle of that night, there's like 3 jokes that are from the other night. So it's awesome because you can hear like the person who's laughing the loudest at some of the jokes suddenly is not laughing the loudest at all for 3 jokes. Like, oh, that person hated those jokes. But yeah, that ended up being a great idea to do it on 2 nights. But
So comedy is what you're doing full time?
It is what I'm doing full time, actually. Yeah, yes. So I have that hour stuff, but it's like not stuff I do anymore. So it's.
Well, what is the turnover with you? Like, was it once you had the CD?
I felt like I had to. Yeah, I felt like it was like, oh, this is the first 3 years of my stand-up career.
Yeah.
Done. Like, here's what I made my first 3 years.
This is it.
Yeah, and like it was also, with some of my like early jokes just like completely falling by the wayside. It was just like, okay, 3 years in, this is what I think is good. And even listening to it now, like I recorded it in December, like listening to it now, I'm like, wow, I was at a very different place then. So I probably have like another half an hour of stuff now.
So can you give me one of your jokes, one of your go-to bits, and like give us the joke and then deconstruct, like where did that come from, or how did you build the tags for that?
Wow. Well, one thing that I'm really trying to do right now is actually work out to transition more to storytelling.
Well, one thing that's come up is that on the north side there's a lot of observational and stuff like that. There's not a lot of people telling their personal stories. So is that...
Oh, really? That's awesome. Well, there you go. I have always like kind of worked from like a personal standpoint, but I feel like something that I've like since recording that album, I'm almost exclusively trying to turn stories into jokes, which I think is like a terrible idea to do. But I also think if you can be successful at it, it's like so rare, like so few people are doing that it's really awesome. Like, so I have this one bit that I've been working on right now that's like my favorite thing I've ever done, and it's a story about meeting. So I'm a really huge fan of the Terminator movies, which is a weird thing to say. That's my favorite movies. And have you ever seen any of the Terminator movies?
Yeah. Well, I saw the first 3 as a kid, and I've seen the last one about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Did you see Terminator 3? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's like a female Terminator in that movie.
Yeah.
It was like a super hot babe, and she. I was in South Africa visiting an ex of mine, and like we met that person. She was a friend of a friend, and we hung out with her all day at the beach. And for me, that was like, yeah, exactly. Like, of all the places to be, I'm like in South Africa, because of course I'm in South Africa, and like of all the people you could meet, there, like, nobody would think that was a cool person to me. Exactly. Like the one Terminator fan, and also she was on the television show The L Word, which, like, I actually was a huge fan of also. So there's like 0 people that fall into the category of like, who has been to South Africa, met the Terminator, cared that they met the Terminator, also known about the L Word. Yeah, like it's 0 people, except, well, maybe 1 person. So I've been working on turning that into like a story that works on stage, and it's crazy.
A lot of great coincidence building.
Yeah, exactly. There's like so many different parts to it, and it actually does work, which is nuts. Like, to me, it's nuts that it works. Like, I told it here in Chicago for like the Just for Laughs festival, which I was like so stoked that at like a big festival I just got to do what I want. And then I told it recently on the road in Austin, Texas, and I was at this like really big comedy club, but also that was in a strip mall outside of Austin, and filled with 300 Texans.
Well, Austin's like the hip spot in
It's
Texas.
hip, but it's still Texas. Like, it's still, and like a strip mall in Austin is still a strip mall in Texas. So I was like, are they gonna like this gay Terminator lady story?
Yeah.
And they did like it. So then that feels like basically the biggest accomplishment of my life. Like, if you can get
If it works there.
300 Texans in a strip mall to be like, yes, we care about this South African incident of meeting, like, that's just the best thing in the world.
So you actually worked the road. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that experience? Because I interviewed people that have been at a couple months for 10, 11 years, but not a lot of people do work the road.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, I don't work the road in the traditional sense of, like, I don't travel the Midwest hosting and featuring at clubs. I do book my own tours, and I go, so I have been on...
You set up like a 3-week or like a month-long tour?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I have done tours in Portland and Seattle and all up and down the East Coast, and I also am a ringmaster for a local circus company. That's true. So I also go on tour with them.
How does that work?
Well, I tell jokes, and then beautiful women hang from their necks, and they have tattoos, and it's kind of punk rock.
Gotcha. How did you even meet them?
How do you do anything? I don't know. It's all very confusing.
The Ringling Brothers came in.
No, it's like, so it's these women that have their own circus school in the West Loop here in Chicago, and they were starting up this circus. I had done a video project like right when I started doing stand-up, and so we kind of kept in touch. I was like, hey, are you looking for someone to host your shows? That's hilarious and endearing. And they were like, we are looking for that person. Yeah, and humble. Yep, and humble. And, yeah, so I do that job. So I tour in those ways, and which is really awesome. Or I, like, have done guest sets for friends of mine. That
do you
are
bring, like, 2 or 3 people with you, or do you just head out on your own?
I've done both.
Okay.
And I feel like kind of what you're talking about with like the Mike David, or in general like alternative comedy, being able to be produced in like theater spaces or clubs.
It's getting easier for an audience to find you with the availability.
Exactly. And like some of those tour stops are in clubs, but then some of them are in small theaters or, you know, like a bar or a restaurant or like a coffee shop too. And so
Those Black is that he's played like Chinese food restaurants.
Right. Yeah, it's awesome. So it's kind of like it's really like creating your own experience from top to bottom.
Within those 2 very different venues, what do you feel like goes into being a good MC?
I think it's always about drawing focus at the right time and giving over focus at the right time. Like, I honestly think that's if you are doing those things, even if you're not getting
equilibrium, you always want to match.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that a lot of people get really, I mean, it's hard to be an MC because if you don't get the laughs that you want, like, we're comedians, we're trained to like our payment is in laughs. Yeah, like seriously, you need it. Like, otherwise you just feel like, oh, like I everything's off. They're not getting me, and it's just that like that's not your job as an MC is to get laughs. Your job is to like create the atmosphere in the room.
Yeah, you're not the one that's necessarily on.
Yeah.
What other avenues does your creativity take?
What do you mean? Like, what else do I do with my time?
Music, or
well, let's see.
strictly comedy?
Between being a circus ringmaster and a stand-up comic, I'm so busy. What else do? I literally do almost nothing else. I go to the gym, and I love. That's it.
So do you
That's
feel like
what I
with
love.
your next CD it'll be a comedy CD, or are you arcing toward like a one-woman show?
Oh, I guess this is also what I do. I'm getting into essay writing, so I also write essays and perform them at like literary events. That's something I've been doing in the past year, and I really like that because it's again going more towards this story idea. Like I think that it's a. And speaking to your question about like what's it like to be a woman and a queer woman in the comedy world, like I feel like I can perform for any audience. I really do. But like the audience that I want to perform for is not always the audience that I have to like try my darndest to win them over as a gay woman.
Yeah.
Like I love the idea that there
It's a
are
bit different when you have fans or somebody that understands your experience.
yeah, exactly. Or like an audience who's just like, hey, we're liberal dudes who listen to NPR. Like, what you got for us? So I feel like, for me, the next direction that I might take is trying to get a book of essays together.
Okay.
Because I feel like touring in that way is also a way to get like different people through the door than your typical like drunk frat crowd.
What's a story about your personal life you haven't explored on the stage yet that you'd like to explore?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I have an answer for that. So I think of stand-up comics as being like everybody who does stand-up. Well, what's yours? Everybody who does stand-up has like something that they had to develop. It like humor is a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So it's all people who had to
For me,
overdevelop.
there's a lot of diffusing tension in the home.
Yeah, right. So everybody's got one. And like improv, people who do improv, I don't necessarily think that's true. Like those are your like class
They come
clowns.
from the
Yeah.
happy childhood.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a happy childhood too. It doesn't necessarily, but yeah, you're right. Diffusing tension in the home it can be anything, you know. Like, and I think stand-ups are like not class clowns. They're people who like had something they were getting over. So for me, when I was a little kid, for like 10 years of my life, I had crossed eyes and I had to wear an eye patch, and
Not fun. A lot of pirate jokes.
a lot of pirate jokes. It wasn't even a cool eye patch. It was like a Band-Aid colored eye patch.
Yeah.
It's really stupid. It came with like stickers that were only brown and orange. Really devastating as a child, you know. But it's something I've never figured out how to talk about in like a concise way.
Yeah.
Because I think that we all have, like
There
you were
is
saying.
humor in it, but you haven't found what
Yeah.
avenue to explore it in.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's we all have our.
So who were your early influences in comedy in terms of stand-up?
You
A
know,
lot of people, they spend their first 2 years sort of imitating someone. Did you go through that process?
You know, I feel like I'm an unusual stand-up in that, like, I didn't actually watch a ton of stand-up when I was a kid. I know there's, like, a lot of people who be like, oh, like, I watched, like, Letterman every night.
It was a big,
And
like,
I didn't.
boom from the 90s. But, you know, if you grew up in the 80s,
Right.
it wasn't necessarily Comedy Central.
Yeah.
It was only SNL.
Exactly. So, like, for me, when I first started doing comedy, I was looking at everybody that was really huge in the Chicago scene at the time, and like those are the people that I loved, and I really consider those people to still be like my biggest influences. And those people, like some of them, like Kumail Nanjiani or T.J. Miller or Hannibal Buress, are people who are now having like a lot of success nationally, and it was really awesome because I felt like those were like the first people that I saw, and so now that they're like having success, I feel like I have like a buy-in there, you know, like I'm like, come on, like
You're
that's
invested in it.
yeah, exactly. And that's why I think Chicago's so wonderful, is because I think that in this scene specifically, like you have access to a lot of the, even as like a brand new performer, you have access to a lot of like the bigger names here in the scene in like a personal way. Like you can talk to them, and there
You'll
can
run
be
into them if you do enough mics.
yeah, you'll run into them all the time. You'll be on the same shows as them. Like they might be headlining, you might be opening, but like you'll still be in their atmosphere.
With MySpace, definitely a very supportive community too.
Yeah.
We'll give you notes, they'll talk to you. One criticism that's come up is that I feel like there are people that do comedy just to make friends. Is that something you feel like you've seen? Like, what's the sort of turnover you've seen over the last 4 years?
I think it's just that, like, when I look at the people that have made it, that I know, or that are moving towards making it, I feel like one thing I've realized is that it's such a self-selecting community. Like, stand-up is, like, you give up all your nights. You have no opportunity for an outside social life. You sleep at the most bizarre hours. Like, you can't hang out with people that have normal jobs because you work when they are off. Like, it's... Yeah, and, like, you don't get to see the sun sometimes because you're, like, sleeping all day because you're up all night. Like, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea to do stand-up. So you have to, like, love it. Like, you have to choose it, I think, every day. And so the turnover rate, like, it's huge. It's like, 1 in 30 will continue to do it after 3 years. But I also think that those people, like, they were just using it for a different thing in their life. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's like, they, like...
Free therapy.
Yeah, free therapy, or, like, they needed buddies at the time. Cheers. Like, those are not the people who are going to get to the next level. Like, the people who are going to get... Yeah, it's, like, seriously, it's everybody who is having success just decides over and over again that they want to be successful, that's what they want to get out of stand-up, as opposed to, like, I go to stand-up shows so that I can drink.
It's hard to maintain a relationship with this life. How has that balance played out for you, particularly with, like, the road and stuff?
I've actually been, that's the one area that, like, I've been pretty lucky, because I tend to date women who are, like, also artists, and I think that that's one thing I learned early. Like, I have no concept of how people do it when they are married to or in a relationship with somebody who is, like, a civilian, like a normal person with a normal life. But I will say that one thing that it's impacted is that, like, I've had relationships end because I didn't feel like I could. The weird thing about stand-up is that, like, you're investing all your time and your energy into this completely intangible thing. Like, you can do it for 3 years and you can know all the shows you've done, but you've nothing. Your hands are empty. You have zero. Like, you don't even have, like, a proper resume that makes any sense to somebody. Like, you have zero. So I feel like it's to, like, figure out how to, like let's say move to another city for a person. I've been in that position where they were like, if you want this relationship to continue, like, I'm moving to another city and you need to move too. And I just felt like at that point, like, if I move right now, like, this like, chunk of my life evaporates. Like,
a lot of comedians have said, like, they couldn't have a regular job. Do you feel like this sort of, like, eats that out of you, your capacity for that sort of stability?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. Especially because, more so than anything, that, like, after a while as a stand-up, you just get so in the routine of working for yourself. Like, I think of myself as like a small business person, and that, like, my...
You're promoting.
Yeah, exactly. Working. Like, like, what I'm selling is myself, Yeah, right? And so I can't imagine having somebody else tell me, like, that I have to turn something in on time, because it's...
Do you ever feel like stability could be, like, a hindrance to the career? Like, in terms of, like, buying a home?
That's a really good question, too. I think that, especially living in Chicago, because I don't know what your experience is of this. Well, I was going to say, like, I feel like living in Chicago, I'm so happy to be here, I'm so happy to be in the scene here, but I know that there's a move. Like, I just know that eventually there's a move to New York or LA. Like, there will have to be for everybody here if they want to do more than just work the road. Like, if they want to do TV and...
If you want to develop a sitcom.
Yeah, like that. Like, there's just no industry here. Yeah. And so I think that's something that has made it hard for me to... Like, you can't create stability because you know in your mind, like, this is all stuff that I'm going to have to leave. Yeah. And do you feel that at all?
Yeah.
But I feel like that tension all the time where it's just like, I love what I'm doing now, but it's so temporary, and I only realize occasionally that, like, other people don't live that way. Other people are, like, living their lives. They're like, oh, like, I have a kickball team because I live in Chicago, and I'm like, I feel like I'm sort of passing through, but it has been such a long passing through. I've been passing through for years.
So what are your thoughts on the comedy scene?
In Chicago in general, or like, what are my thoughts on it?
Do you feel like comedy is sort of on a resurgence right now?
Yeah, I think that the Chicago stand-up scene is. I can't imagine a better place to like cut your teeth, because in New York and LA there is so much industry.
Yeah.
I am so thankful that like the people who eventually will be booking big shows didn't see me 2.5 years ago. Like, I'm so glad that I was here in Chicago, like growing and watching other comics and
trying to get polished.
and figuring out like like what is comedy and what do I want to say on stage. And so I feel like Chicago is sort of what you were talking about. Like, I feel like Chicago is really like the university of comedy. I mean, just looking at like people who are coming up in the national scene right now, we have so many former Chicago comics who are doing well.
2 or 3 people working on SNL. And
yeah, like it's.
Aaron Foster's put out a CD. You just put out a CD. Mike's just got like the hottest club in the city, and he's going to be opening more.
Right.
Presumably across the country.
Right. So it's awesome. But
talk to me about opening polls then. Like, what caused you to bring it together? How have you evolved in how you run the show?
For sure. Well, this actually speaks to the part about being a woman at Mike's, because I think that
I hear that you guys are super encouraging to everybody.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think that's how all open mics should be. I think some mics should be shitty, and I think sometimes you should get up on stage and nobody should listen to you, and I think sometimes you should get up on stage and people should boo you off stage. I've had those experiences. I think they are important, but I also think it's important to like put somebody in the app, like, hey, here's your best room. Like, you've got 3 minutes. Yeah, like you've got 3 minutes, and you might be your own source of failure, but like the room isn't going to be a source of failure. And I think it's important for people to have both options, especially women, because like I think already you're taking women who are feeling a little bit out of it because there's sort of the cliquishness or the coworker feeling, and then you're putting them in a scenario where, like, you know, open mics are populated heavily by rape jokes and dick jokes, and you're taking women and you're being like, hey, sit through 30 people as they talk about raping you, and then get up on stage, and then everybody else will talk through you, and then see if you want to come back tomorrow.
Speaking of rape jokes, maybe this will talk a little bit about like how you run your room. You banned Trenton Willie. You're one of many people that has banned him.
Yeah, I mean, he took off his clothes on stage. And that, like, just for Cole himself, who's, like, the best, like, that's illegal. You can't have, like, you actually can't, which is terrible, DIY, because I wish we could have more naked women on stage, but it's, so yeah, he took off his clothes, and that was it for me. And I think that he has an idea that there was a different reason why he was banned, but he
thought it was because he made rape jokes, but...
Well, he talked about specifically raping somebody in the audience, and then he took off his clothes. So for me, as like, I mean, hey, an open mic is an open mic, but at the same time, like, we maintain an audience there so that comics can perform for an audience.
Gotcha.
Like, there are some mics where you can do whatever you want. Yeah. Cheers. Those mics should exist. But at the same time, like, a newer comic should have the opportunity to perform in front of an audience. And if you're going to get somebody on stage and they're going to take off their clothes and talk about raping audience members, like, that audience is not going to stay. It's just not going to stay. And then 5 comics later, that guy's performing for nobody. And I think that's, like, not the room I want to run.
A lot of comics start their own rooms and then only other comics come. So talk to me, like, how do you bring people in? And actually, you probably had to build, like, an audience. And
we're really lucky. I think part of it is that this bar opened like just around the same time that we started the mic, so I think people just immediately were like branded with like this is the. And they also host music, but their music schedule is, you know, or like transitions from week to week. And I think that in the neighborhood here, like there was a void where it was like there's not a ton of comedy going on. People started to realize like, oh, this is going on every Wednesday night, and we also. Cole bought a stage at the Milwaukee Avenue Arts Festival this year, and like people from the mic got to host those shows and like work with local bands. I think it's just about like being
Building
consistent
like a
in a
brand.
place. Yeah, exactly, branding for sure.
So give me, like, what's your worst experience bombing?
Oh my
or
goodness.
an experience bombing that is story-worthy or noteworthy for...
I went to a show on the south side once, actually southwest side. It was like a really tough neighborhood.
It's a lot more aggressive with the audience there. The audience demands
Yes.
more.
But this, and like, yes, and that I was expecting. But what I was not expecting, and it was like in a really scary neighborhood, and when I walked in, I was the only white person in the room. So there's like an all-black atmosphere. Cheers. Already, so you have your guard up a little bit because you're feeling like, well, I was feeling slightly out of place.
Yeah.
And then all the performers in the show met backstage, and we held hands and said a prayer.
Oh,
And I was like,
wonderful.
wow, this is not gonna go awesome, I think, because I've never had started a show with a group prayer before. And I ended up mentioning a girlfriend on stage. I had asked somebody before the show, like, do I need to not talk about being gay? And they were like, no, I think people are fine. People love Ellen DeGeneres, which I thought was an awesome answer. And so I like referenced a girlfriend or something, and literally the entire crowd just became dead silent. Like, not like just staring, just only staring. And I like finished that joke, and then I said, like, did that just happen because I'm gay? And somebody in the audience said, yep. And I like finished my set and walked out of the
You still powered through
place. Like, I think I maybe did like one more joke or maybe not. I don't know. But I got my stuff and left. That's the only time I've ever done that. Like,
It's scary.
yeah, I was really freaked out. I was really freaked out, and it took me actually it's so crazy because it took me a really long time to get back to doing shows on the South Side after that, because I was just like,
Never
those
again.
people, they don't understand me.
Have you played
But-
suburban versus city scenes? Obviously, if you do the road, you have.
Yeah, both have,
Just talk to
for
me,
sure.
Like, is there a definite difference in the kind of crowd that they draw?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, my parents are from the suburbs, so I know what that... I mean, I was raised in the suburbs, so I know what that crowd is like, and I guess I don't alter my material that much, except for, like, I would be dirtier in the city, I guess, but I'm not a very dirty comic in general.
More blue.
But more so, it's just, like, it's shocking the more I do shows in different places, the more I realize, like, if you give people a reason to get on your side, like they
wanna
can
be
go
there.
there. Yeah. Regardless of who you are or who they are. So, like,
They want to root for you.
I just recently did a show in Wilmette where it was like 60 white-haired people. You know, like literally white-haired people. And I was like, how's this going to go? You know? And it went great. Like, it went awesome. And they were coming up to me afterwards and like shaking my hand and being like, you know, like, you get them. Go, just do it. Just do it. Get them. And they...
Like your spunk.
Yeah, exactly. Like, whoa, you old son of a... But I think that's all you have to do. You just have to give them, hey, like, this is me being honest with you, and this is me being real with you, and people will get on board more often than not.
So, what's some good advice that you've gotten or that you would give to new comics?
Well, somebody who has been kind of a guru for me is Mark Geary. He is the producer of a room here in Chicago called the Lincoln Lodge, which is one of the first alternative stand-up venues in Chicago. We started running like 10 years ago, and I help to produce shows there now. And Mark is like the only person that I know in the comedy community in Chicago who holds me accountable for things. If you don't show up to shows, he gets upset with you. He treats you like a business person, and he treats you like an artist, but also like somebody who owes him
you have
something.
A responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that's something that so often happens in this field is that like we are drinking while we're working. We're literally drinking and working at the same time. So I think people can forget that.
Was there a time that it took you to like find your limits, like no more than like 2 drinks before you perform, or if you're emceeing tonight, like are you going to be drinking as you MC?
I would say that actually the biggest.
Because I think you get like 40 people, so you could go to like 2 or 3
Yeah.
in the morning.
I'm like the luckiest person in the world. Here's why. I don't have like a desire to ever want to drink more than like 2 or 3 drinks. I'm the world's perfect stand-up comic. Like I totally stop 80% of the time. One time I did. I'll tell you what don't do. Don't take muscle relaxers and then drink a lot. Yeah, at a show. Because it will relax your muscles almost entirely.
So you became like a string bean on the stage.
No, I wasn't even on the stage. I was at like a comics after party, and I was trying to... You know, like you're always trying to be like, all right, guys, like we're all pretty cool here, right? And then I passed out on the floor because your muscles don't work. They don't tell you that about muscle relaxers, is that they relax your muscles.
Don't drive.
Yeah, don't drive, or bike.
Have you got to meet any of your idols as you've sort of worked up in the comedy venue?
I have, which is really cool. I got to work with Robin Williams a couple years ago at the Lakeshore, which was really awesome when that theater existed. And then I also got to work with Tig Notaro at the Lakeshore, who's somebody that I really like. And like we struck up kind of a friendship, and so I have like gotten to do guest sets for her other places, which is really rad. And like the best thing in the entire world for me when I'm like,
Spike and ball.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I definitely. Yeah, I mean, I've like been to festivals and like been walking down the hall and I'm like passing Maria Bamford, just like that's Maria Bamford. Yeah. That's her. She's small. I think that what I've learned though, she's a tiny person. I think that what I've learned though also is that it's like really. I think it's really important to meet other comics that you think that are rad on a night that you are also on the show. Like I've also had the experience of like being at shows where really awesome comics that I like are, and I think it's like one of those things where you're like, where they're like, hey, you're like, hey, I'm a really big fan, and they're like, oh, cool. Do you do stand up? Like, have you ever been to an open mic? Do you ever do stand up? And you want to be like, no, I'm your peer. Like I think you're a god, but also like we're in it together. You could talk to me about shop, you know. So I think I actually like almost try not to like go see really huge names when they come through town because I don't. I want to like meet them when
on an equal ground of some
yeah, exactly. Because otherwise it's like so depressing to be a fanboy. I think that's just me. You always think it's going to be your glorious moment and they're going to realize that they're your best friend, and it always ends up being like, okay, well, yeah, we have nothing to say, huh? Oh, great. This has gone beautifully.
On that note, I think your show is starting.
Let's go do it.
At 9, so check out this material from Cameron. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Suck my dick. I don't mean it personally. I just saw G.I. Jane this week. Come on, who's seen that movie, yeah? Shit, right? Horrifying military brutality and a hot lady. To me, you know what I'm talking about. That's the climax of this movie, like this very political movie. Who has seen this movie? Clap it up if you've seen G.I. Jane. Even if it was back in the day. You know, it's the one with the one-armed, and then she shaves her. Come on, right? It's the one where she got Ashton, I think. I don't know, but I think so. Do we remember it? It's this whole, like, it's about, like, women's struggle, and, like, the SEALs, and, like, it's so, And that's the climax of the entire movie, this crazy political movie, is that she turns to fucking Viggo Mortensen and instructs him to suck her dick. Come on in, guys, we're talking about dick sucking. I am Cameron Esposito. Welcome to Chicago Underground Comedy. Give it up for yourselves. Because this is actually, I'm going to be real with you, this is an unbelievable lineup. You guys are here tonight to see Welcome. Grab an uncomfortable plastic chair. Get up here. How are you? What were you doing out there? You didn't know where it was! You thought it was at your table. No, it's in the one with the stage. Is this the first time you've been to Chicago Underground Comedy? Yes, no. No, yes, no. Yes, no, yes. Everybody keeps saying it at once. Saying different things. How about you, sir? Arms crossing head? You know, what am I going to do? I'm really nice, honestly. Now that you say that, I don't know what I'm going to say. You are wearing a 312 shirt and drinking a 312, so I commend you, first of all, for being through and through. Yeah, you should definitely go tell the bartender. No, didn't work? Take your shirt off, see if that changes anything, am I right? Look at this guy's physique, come on! You're handsome. Yes, do you agree? Look at you say that, I know. Oh my goodness gravy! How are you guys over here? Are you here to see Nate? So you're trying to, yes? Good to have your... And anyone, that's really inclusive. Especially everyone else. And our friend, and also most other people. That's awesome. We're glad to have him in town. That's Nate Craig. He's going to be on the lineup tonight. He's in from LA. Oh! They're beautiful there, ma'am. I don't know if you know this about that. They're very... They do lots of... Yes, this is drugs. Which is weird, because that part of Mr. Holland's opus makes no sense if you really think of it. If you're like... Drugs, 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 coal. I don't know how it goes. Oh! Who's in love with me already? Come on, stop it! You guys, just because I'm wearing my prepared-to-mation please, stop it. What's going on? This weekend, okay, my sister's getting married. This is fantastic news because I love her fiancé. That's great news. Clap it up for that. Yay, my sister. Also awesome, I'm in the wedding. I am her maid of honor. Totally right. She's my sister and stuff. We're close and everything. This guy knows about weddings. But what's weird about it, sir, okay, so I'm a queer lady, and my parents, I feel like, are at the point where they're, like, pretty chill with that. Except till this wedding started to brew. Because I'm going to be honest with you guys, my parents' biggest fear right now is that I will show up to the wedding in a pantsuit. Like, nothing is more terrifying to my suburban, conservative parents. So much so that my mom met me out for coffee recently. She brought a J. Crew magazine. And one of the pages was dog-eared. And she opened it up. She's like, there's a wedding section in this J. Crew. Look at all these bridesmaids. They're all wearing dresses. Huh? It's a group of bridesmaids. And it's true. It's all women in dresses. And then one of the women is wearing a fedora. My mom goes, look at this, Cameron, look. She's wearing a dress, but she has a hat. Huh? You're wearing a hat. I love it. My mom is, like I say, my parents are, I don't know, are your parents chill with everything that's going on in your life? Like, yeah, okay. But like, do they always know how to express that? I feel like that's something we can all share. Like, do your parents know how to express that they're chill with your... Yeah, like something like it's like, but like not. Like my mom. Okay, so there's this 4th of July parade in the neighboring town that I grew up in, and 99% of the parade is just little league teams that have won some sort of championship, just one after the other, all of them meaningless. Just like the Cup of the World Cup, the cup which a world could live in. Like it's all of them. And then there's always marching in this parade, P flag. parents and friends of gays and lesbians. My parents would never go to a P-Flag meeting. But like every year, when P-Flag starts to march by, if my mom sees them on the horizon, she'll stand up from her lawn chair. She'll give them an old look-see. And then she'll salute. You know, it's nice. Like, she's meeting me. I don't think that's... But I like it, you know? So you can imagine how awesome... So I have two, like, super heterosexual siblings. But my little sister is, like, crazy heterosexual, but also... Like, who here knows people like this? It's like, the world is a river. My life is a river. Whatever washes over me is fine. Do you guys know anybody like this? Yes, dude, yeah. It's just like, well, I can't explain it. It's the universe. Like, I love her. She's awesome. But because of this, she's currently dating a woman. Like a really butch woman. Like a woman who's interested in gender roles that don't make sense. I'm like, I think you are still presenting like it's not even like you're gender queer or trans. It's like you're just Latina, actually. Sorry about that. I got a little bit, but it's true. So, a couple weekends ago, my little sister's in a play. My parents, the lady that I'm seeing, we went to go see this play. And I had a conversation with my dad. Well, by conversation, I mean I asked him one question about this person my little sister's seeing. I said, Dad, have you met Claudia yet? And he said, I'm not upset about it! What are you trying to tell me? I'm not upset about it! At dinner. In a restaurant. In a public dinner. 80s. Fancy man, my dad. You're interested? He's married. To my mother. Anyway, how are you doing? Are we all... Who feels good? Yeah. I'll have you know, this routine is disgusting, but free if you perform here. Like I said earlier in the middle of telling you to suck my dick, which you can still do if you like, sir. It is green. And not because I need to get it checked out, just because it's at home. Ladies and gentlemen, I gotcha! My little hand. I think things are gonna be a little harsh. I used to work in special ed. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but if you're just generally slow, the actual diagnosis is globally mentally retarded. So I just think that's why set it up so that this conversation has to happen? Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Esposito, thanks for coming in. We figured out what's going on with Cameron. Your daughter is retarded in a way that affects us all. Really, the whole world made stupider by your child. So, good luck. Best of luck.
I was recently spending some time with an older woman. Some dating time. 10 years age difference. This time spent together research, has led me to the following conclusion. I don't know exactly what happens between 28 and 38, but based on her apartment, I think it happens at Pier 1. Or IKEA. Because they had a lot of dramatic bowls. And wicker and statuary from religions she doesn't belong to. You know?